Namaskar. Honorable President, South Asian University, Professor A.K. Aggarwal sir. Respected Dr. Arvind Gupta, Director, Vivekananda International Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, today is a very special occasion and a very, very special moment for all of us. We have just signed a memorandum of understanding between South Asian University and Vivekananda International Foundation. A moment that we have been very keenly looking forward to for several reasons. And one of these reasons is vision. Without which we cannot become as transformative as all of us would like to be. Who can forget the address by Swami Vivekananda in Chicago? It will remain in the human memory forever. Vivekananda International Foundation is one of the premier think tanks, which is guided by a beautiful vision, which needs more and more critical reflection, thought, and theorizing, and that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. This morning, when I was doing my own work to asking myself as to what would be the best way to extend a very warm welcome on behalf of South Asian University and its flagship Institute of South Asian Studies, how do I introduce our distinguished speaker today, Dr. Arvind Gupta ji? What do I say about Honorable President, whose Vedas touch we continue to feel day in and day out? I could not think of anything better than a few quotes and insights. Honorable President has always been telling us not to be narrow-minded. He has been telling us to cross boundaries of our discipline, boundaries of our department, boundaries of our faculty. And each conversation that each one of us has with the Honorable President will agree with me that we always leave his office in deep thought and reflection. So first of all, I would like to thank him, the Honorable President, for inspiring us, for provoking us, for leading us from the front, as they say, and for creating the opportunities that perhaps at one stage we were only dreaming of. Now those dreams are unfolding before us as wonderful realities. South Asian University is not just marching, South Asian University is galloping, if I may say that. So thank you very much, for bringing to this campus your vitality, your energy, your warmth, and your experience, which absolutely needs no introduction. Dr. Arvind Gupta ji, again, it is so difficult to introduce him. Our gratitude to him is very deep and I would say eternal. I've had the great honor and privilege of knowing him, interacting with him, meeting him over long decades. And the more I meet him, the more I realize the power of vision. He is the director of, as you all know, Vivekananda International Foundation today. He was the Deputy National Security Advisor and Secretary National Security Council Government of India during 2014-17. He was Director General of the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, New Delhi during 2012-2014. And as a former career diplomat, he has served with the Ministry of External Affairs and Indian missions abroad. He speaks regularly on the various Indian universities and the various Indian universities, military, paramilitary, police, and diplomatic academies on foreign policy and national security issues. He has guided research students at premier educational institutions. He is a member of the Board of Studies at the School of International Studies at JNU and has honorary academic position at Vivekananda University and also Andhra University. Profound thinker, author of 5 books, his last book, Opportunity for India in a Changing World, was published in 2021. His book, How India Manages its National Security, was published by Aggarwal in 2018. In 2022, Sage India published a co-edited volume titled India's Foreign Policy Surviving in a Turbulent World. He also co-edited with Vivekananda the volume titled India's Foreign Policy Surviving in a Turbulent World, and he has co-edited a book which I am holding in my hands titled Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the relevance of India's future thinking to contemporary strategic reality. Dr. Arvind Gupta, please allow me to cite from your introduction to this book, which introduces this great concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We hear about it day in and day out, of course, but sometimes perhaps we do not appreciate enough the richness of this concept, the immortality of this concept, this ancient concept. I picked up a very small para, and that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the practice of which is undateable in its antiquity, occurs, as we all know, in Maha-Upanishad, in Samveda, the last of 4 Vedas, which is 4,000 years old. And it says, I won't read the Sanskrit part of it, but I will read the translation part of it, which says that, I quote, "He is mine, the other is different," is an idea of the narrow-minded, unquote. The first part of the verse talks of the contemporary them versus us, that dichotomy. The them versus us ideas, which are regarded as narrow in modern times, were labeled as narrow-minded in ancient India. And the second part of this verse says, I quote in English, "Large-hearted people view the whole world as one family," unquote. Now that richness of this philosophy, the vision of our honorable president, the vision of Dr. Arvind Gupta, then made me read, and I will conclude with this, please allow me, from Rumi's beautiful little book of life. And Rumi, as we know, was the great Persian philosopher, theologian, poet, and Sufi mystic of the 13th century. And he says, I quote, and that is what Honorable President has been reminding us: if you are narrow-minded, the whole world will appear narrow to you. If you are happy and with friends, the world will seem a garden of roses. Many have gone as far as Syria and Iraq and seen nothing but unbelief and hypocrisy. Many have gone as far as Iraq and India and seen nothing but buying and selling. Many have gone as far as Turkestan and China and see nothing but deceit and trickery. If the traveler is after external sensations, he may travel the world and see nothing of spirit. But the spacious realm beyond all the effect is the abode of God the divine, ever changing and far over new. Everything, be it paradise or the rivers of freedom, becomes ugly when it fixed permanently in one aspect. So, unquote that. With these few words, may I now request Honorable President to welcome our distinguished speaker with a bouquet of flowers and then with a bouquet of his thoughts and insights before we watch.
The Honorable Speaker for the day, President Dr. Gupta, and we know each other for quite some time, and his contributions to the country for provoking thought processes in many areas. And really to some of those, I did not attend many of their functions, but whenever I attended, I found a very new energy and the variety of topics, the diversity of subjects, is this one of the most important think tanks of the country is engaging in and giving a new whole interpretation to the word security. When it started, probably it was to give thought processes to the security systems, but then very soon, particularly after very active engagement of Arvind Gupta, it was realized that security today itself has become diversified. I mean, as I was saying the other day today, if you are technologically weak, you are in a system, whatever your business. If you are economically weak, you are in a system, you will be having any amount of services. So security concept itself has become technological, scientific, economical, political, social, everything. And to be able to be managing a think tank of that level is something great. The type of people associated with the center is an example of the type of work which is going on. And I'm so happy with Dr. Arvind Gupta taking time off to be with us. And he visited earlier also, we had some more discussions. And as Vice President Mr. Sanjay we have signed a formal MOU today, although I always believe we always had a MOU in the mind, but we put it on paper. But the point is, we have to carry it forward. We are a university where academics in all its possible dimensions are still in this. And this think tank thinks of various people. So our PhD students, our faculty, our master's students, more and more they get attract. Whatever it will be, it could be joint projects, it could be lectures, it could be roundtables, any formats, any mediums. But more and more interaction is the thing that people will do. And I'm so happy that Dr. Arvind Gupta has agreed to talk about some geopolitical concerns today. But we can have him anytime we feel we need him, because the purpose is joint. The purpose is same, that we are able to do good for the nation, good for the region, and as good for the world to the extent we can. And with this, I once again welcome Dr. Gupta and hope that such interaction will continue at various levels, students interaction, faculty particularly. I would like to be involved in practical issues much more than academic. These request
colleagues from the VIF, Dr. Vivekananda has just spoken. He is one of our leading thinkers of climate change. And we talk about the moderate talk today. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here with you, all of you, and exchange some views on the current geopolitical trends and how they impact South Asia. But before I do that, I want to thank Mr. Aggarwal and Mr. for making it possible for the VIF to partner formally with SAU through the medium of this memorandum of understanding. As Mr. Aggarwal said, that ever since we met, I think about 7-8 years ago, this collaboration has been on our mind in various ways. So he has been very kind to have given his time, very valuable time, 2018 and 2019, to the VIF, when we came out with the first of its kind report under his leadership on STEM education. So we were feeling about the need for STEM education, and he is a renowned educationist having been a vice chancellor at so many universities. And I was really struck by the respect that he enjoys in the education community in the country, abroad. That just by one phone call, we had about 25-30 vice chancellors who came to the VIF and we had several discussions. And later on also we followed some more discussions. So I know today if I have to connect with somebody in the education world, I have only one word. And thank you, Professor Aggarwal, for. But as you said, Sanjay, that he is also that mode. You know, he chooses you. He's very quiet. But he chooses you because of his vision, etc. Because he has reached a stage where there is no personal agenda anymore. We are all working for India. We are working for society. It's not that you are raising your profile in some places. And I think that's a good position to be. Because there's nothing that you have to gain. So, I think South Asian University is very lucky to have him as the president. And now that I reconnected with him last few months, and I can see that how the university is gathering it. And we discussed a few ideas about it. And that's how I very much welcome that your faculty, your students should regularly interact with the GIS and the scholars. We are not an academic institution, but we're focusing on policy issues, but a multidisciplinary. We have a very large community of strategic thinkers who are giving their time almost without demanding anything from us. They come to us. But the students can interact. And that is, I think, what can bring a certain rigor and depth in the academic pursuits, which are very important. And I also see my former colleague Metha here. She and I worked together at the IDSA some years ago. She's been here for a number of years now. And she will vouch for the fact that the interaction between think tanks and university is very important, both ways, and it works both ways. We learn something from the academic rigor and the discourse that takes place in institutions. And you gain something from the interaction with the policy institution. But in the end, we have to, I think about the government, about the society and what to work. I think this is very important. So thank you for organizing this. And I think Professor Chaturvedi, quoting from the Vedas and from Rumi, also has brought certain atmosphere in the room, which is very apt for discussing the geopolitics. So, Professor, stop me when I think my time is, because I might just go in the various directions. Although I have a script, but I'm not really sure that I'll be able to follow this. Because so many ideas are. So let me begin by saying that international politics is never stable. So, and this really ties up with the core Buddhist philosophy. Nothing in this world is permanent. So sometimes you think, I hope it's okay if I sometimes break into Hindi. Sometimes we think that what we see around us is going to continue for the rest of the world. And all of us, I think, culturally, civilizationally, coming from the South Asian regions, understand this. You don't have to really be told by either Rumi or anybody else. It's very much into our system. But it is not quite clear that a new geopolitical environment, which is perhaps distinctly different from what was there 10, 15, 20 years ago, is shaping up. How it shapes up is still in the future. Maybe some broad trends are visible. Talking about response. And in this new environment, a new balance of power is taking place. See, geopolitics is all about balance of power. And maybe you could say balance of interest. And as the power dynamic changes, the shape of the world also changes. And that is beginning to happen. Stresses have been building on the international order for quite some time. We could say that the end of the Cold War itself was a result of so many stresses which are built in the post-Cold War after 1945. But several major, I think there are milestones which we could identify, which indicates that stresses were building slowly, and now I think they are somewhere at the breaking point. Maybe I'm wrong, but even if we are not at a breaking point, but we are at a point where fundamental changes are taking place. Whether that happens with violence, without violence, needs to be seen. I hope we can control the violence. As you can see, in the last few years, there's so many bushfires which are there all over. And it is a dangerous sign. The security environment has deteriorated very sharply. And certain constraints that were there earlier now they are no longer. On the nuclear side, for instance, practically all our constraints that were there are gone. There is no nuclear control, arms control treaty today. It is something like nuclear proliferation treaty, but that is more or less all the premises are there. And today, perhaps, with the US withdrawing or indicating that it's going to withdraw its security umbrellas, and it is leaving certain doubts as to what is the future of Europe is saying that they are already calculated, they have found 800 billion euros. They think that they will now be spending on last so many years. They had a US security umbrella in the shape of Transatlantic Alliance, NATO. But now that is there are big question marks on that. So they are now scampering to find, and they are being encouraged by the US. They are now protecting. So they are finding $800 billion. And suddenly there is a problem. Now, if Europe starts rearming to that level, what is the shape of the security? So that's one question. We don't have an answer, but that's a question. Now, if one part of the world begins to rearm, then next door is in the Indo-Pacific in Japan, South Korea. These are the next two. Already Japan is increasing its military expenditure, and they are again being told. Then of course there is this big power which is China. They already have a massive nuclear technology, and they want to be put in their store. So I think some big changes, which signs were there, but now they are going to space. So that's I think one picture. But I think I've jumped the gun. Let me just from that little sequence in which I had thought that I would speak. But let me come back to the major events. I would say this stresses were building up. So the disintegration of the Soviet Union after the end of the Cold War was one very big event, and we are still living with the consequences. Russia, which took the responsibilities of the USSR, was not incorporated into a new European security architecture, which ought to have happened, and which was expectation after the end of the Cold War and the demise of the Soviet Union. So it feels like it was a short shift. And that feeling has been still over a period of time, over the last 3 decades, through the expansion of it. So when you talk about Ukraine, just also look at the attendant factor, which is the eastward expansion of NATO, the Trans-Atlantic Alliance, which is something that the Russians will not live with as it is. So that's a red line for them. And that is where, well, that's why Ukraine. So that's, in a very simplified way, that is the main reason. Then you had the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Again, a milestone, which led to Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, the rise of radical terrorism, Islamic State, etc. A whole chain of events there. And that has not stopped. That is taking different forms. And now we are seeing a former terrorist regime, which was very much involved in genocide, etc., is now sitting in Syria and supported by the West, those who are actually fighting them. The topsy-turvy. So that was another chain of events which started with 9/11 terrorist attacks. Then you had the global financial crisis of 2008 to 10. Again, a chain of events started, and we are still not actually out of it. And that actually signaled the rise of China. Because earlier we found that all the financial system which the US had created, on which there's a lot of trust all around the world. But if you don't have trust in these financial systems, no. And that trust was broken. And it also indicated to a very different kind of financial systems which were taking shape and which were governing our lives. And which is this, all this, the banking system, the way the debt markets, the future markets, and so on, of which you and I did not know. We just go and put our money in a what is it called, stock market or mutual fund, etc. But they are part of a larger system. You put trust in your mutual fund, but that mutual fund is governed by somebody else's, and that in turn is governed by somebody else, and so on and so forth. So these derivatives, which came into, which were designed by some of the greatest financial thinkers in the US, and they were responsible for this, and it broke heart of so many, trust of so many countries who inspectors. And we still haven't come back to that. And it also showed the importance of greed in geopolitics. That was another one. The third was, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's set the better. And we frankly do not know. We should be thankful to the virus that it did not turn out to be so severe and it only took a few million lives. It could have been few tens of million lives. Had it been something like the Spanish flu of 1918 or so, the death rate here was about 2 or 3%, something like that, less than that. If it were 10%, 15%, the whole world would have been wiped out. And there is no guarantee that new viruses are not taking shape. And they are just out of control of the human beings. Because we don't learn any lesson from it. So COVID-19 also brought a number of new factors in the geopolitical thinking. We found that the vaccines were not there. When the vaccines were there, they were not ready to share the ideas. When some vaccines were produced, they were cornered by some people. The most powerful people were the ones who were cornering. They were inoculating their populations 3 times or 4 times because there was not a single vaccine in Africa. And where a country like India, with large population, was helping its friends, whatever vaccines they had, with a little bit of their reputation. And suddenly you realize that you need a totally new way of thinking about this. And attended things. And then, of course, the rise of these technologies, and now AI is big, and which has been going on for a while. And where does it leave the human beings? So we think that in the hallowed halls of United Nations, decisions are taken, etc. But nature and these kind of factors, they don't care about. So geopolitics is important. But there are so many other factors which are outside the geopolitics which impact geopolitics. And unfortunately, in our international relations theories, we have zero idea. It's a totally discredited theories that we have. they don't just account for India. It was okay to explain the world which came into being between 1919 and 1945, and because the resources were followed by a few people, the intellectual resources were there, they gave some theories, and they justified their rise. They justified their actions. But so much of the activity is outside those precincts and bureaucracies that these theories don't explain. That's why that's why possibility is a new way of thinking. So that was another event. And then, of course, we had the 2014 Russia annexing Crimea, and in 2022, Russia invading Ukraine. 2022 is, you have to trace it to 2014, and 2014 you have to trace it to the demise of the Soviet Union and the rise of new power. So these connections have to be made, otherwise we'll get into the propaganda which is there in Western think tanks. But these are all connected areas. Unfortunately, you cannot today, segregate any of this. It's all there. So these are some events, and there may be many more. I mean, in this category, you will have many more. But the point I'm trying to make is that geopolitics is not. It has always been complex and complicated, so it has become even more so. So, what happened to the world? The bipolar world of the Cold War appears briefly in polarity and then to multipolarity with the rise of new powers like China, Brazil, India, Indonesia, and so on. The inherently undemocratic UN system of multilateralism has become increasingly dysfunctional. It is still there, it will not go anywhere, but it is simply there. And this is a big challenge today. And that is why you find we are going back to, people are talking about next time when they meet, next time if Putin and Trump meet, there will be New York. So some countries coming together, decide, and China will come, some countries coming together, deciding about the future of the world, etc. So we are going back to that kind of time. So that is because the multilateralism has become dysfunctional. But at the same time, there is a whole set of countries led by Russia, China, India, and now many more, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, and others, who also are putting their might behind multipolarity. We don't know what multipolarity might do, but certainly, let's plan with this kind of thoughts coming from certain countries, etc. So they are now becoming, look at the role that Saudi Arabia is playing. It's amazing. I mean, it's fantastic. Probably India could have done that. Sometimes comes to me. Maybe we could have, maybe we'll do it in the future. So multipolarity, whether it will be effective, not effective, how far it will go, because the US does not like multipolarity, but it is here to stay. And some kind of they will be finding their way through. So we have a new situation. And probably it takes us back to the 19th century. Because these things, these are systemic issues. They keep on coming as the system evolves. We had the multipolarity in the 19th century, which broke down everything. And multipolarity does not necessarily mean stability. Multipolarity can be very destabilizing and unstable also. Depends on what issues you deal with. Ultimately, in the BRICS or in SCO or in Africa Union, any of these regional blocs, etc., they ought to be taking decisions which solve the problems, not create problems. Because sometimes some of these institutions only create problems. And you cannot do that if you are very narrowly focused on your interest, then you will not be able to solve the problem. That's why you can also do humane globalization that the Prime Minister has talked about. Let me come to globalization. Globalization that began in the 80s became hyper-globalization of the late 20th and 21st century. Undoubtedly, globalization has created a massive amount of wealth. The problem is Who controls that debt? 1% controlling 50%. The bottom some percent, I think 50% control 10%. That's the kind of thing. I mean, these figures keep changing. So it has created inequality, acute inequality, and which is showing. So globalization created a lot of wealth, but it failed the test of what our Prime Minister calls Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, or inclusive and sustainable. And globalized bringing wealth, but it failed that test. And I think this should become part of our international discourse. Please suppose something is like so production became decentralized, leading to extended supply chains, another problem. So supply chains reduce your costs, increase your profit, but also very low. Or all kinds of disruptions. And we have seen the kind of disruptions that have happened, whether it was COVID or the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And in Russia's soon after that, the grain and energy markets were severely disrupted. And it is because the energy markets were disrupted, problems in Europe started. Energy prices went up here, and Germany started going in recession, and other countries. And today, Europe can talk about 800 billion euros of defense, but where does it come from? And today, accustomed to low interest rates, comfortable lives, cheap imports, European population are not going to pay for defense expenditure and send their young people to die in wars which is the senseless wars. So Europe is in a complete mess today. So the world is again getting fragmented and protectionist, and that is the key trend in geopolitics today. The rule of law and the market, so-called market rule of law on which this global order was based, which all of us subscribe and still subscribe anyway, that is not being challenged. The problem was that the markets were never really fully free. And they left behind those who did not have capital or some kind of. So all of us became police. I mean, our great software accomplishment, most of it is in the supply of. We haven't really produced any products. We may be a big player in software and services market, etc. But we have been left behind in so many areas. So the markets were never fully free, or they did not. Their production was not available. It was there in the data, but not available. I was happy with the cell phone because I provided the market. But what is inside the cell phone, I had no say in that. And that's why you have this problem of privacy and the chips and so on and so forth. And they also mentioned me कि हर 6 महीने में साल भर में आप सेल फोन चेंज कर दीजिए. EMI के ऊपर आप अरे यार वो आईफोन आपका है, वो ये वाला एडिशन है या उससे 4 साल पहले वाला, it gives you the same service. They packaged it so beautifully. The films and so on and so forth, and everywhere intellectual property was involved. And they were developing it. And so we are becoming the slaves if we don't have intellectual property. So another very important aspect of geopolitics is who owns the intellectual property. Then there is the rule of law. They talk a lot about rule of law. They are going, crazy about Russian invasion of Ukraine and the sovereignty coalition, etc. What did they do in Kosovo? Why was Yugoslavia broken? They were the first people who cast a stone, breaking countries left and right. What did they do in Libya? They completely violated the UN Security Council resolutions and interpreted it in a way that started bombing Libya. NATO started bombing Yugoslavia. And now they talk about they're horrified that Russia has gone into Ukraine. How many times they went into various countries of Europe is remade. I mean, he is the student of geopolitics. How many times has Europe been made and remade in the last, say, 100 years? And they are not shy of doing it. They still remake it because of Yugoslavia and other countries. So there are some complicating factors as well. Geopolitics is, as I said, balance of power. So big countries they talk about it. This will remain very important because there are leaders. Leadership तो होती है. लेकिन जो complicating factor है वो भी कम नहीं. They are also huge. Climate change. I think everybody is aware of climate change, but how it is impacting geopolitics. Look at the emergence of Arctic. And then geopolitical first. All due to climate change. The geographies have changed due to climate change. The extreme weather events, they expose your weaknesses all the time. If you cannot handle your forest fires, if a hurricane strikes the most developed country in the world, and for 10-15 days there is no power, then what impression do those who you are trying to, your friends, allies, and adversaries, what impression do you get? जो पहले छुपा हुआ था, वो climate change सबको उठा रहे थे, and then the maximum number of COVID deaths took place in the US, and they were importing paracetamol from India. So climate change is unforgiving, and of course, climate change is very complicated. There is no easy solutions. But attendant issue is that of energy transition. Because again, a highly geopolitical issue. There are no easy answers. Clean energy, green energy, renewable energy, etc. As Dr. Bhatt will tell you, is only part of the story. It is a very serious issue. Because if not handled, it can snuff your growth completely. Also, it is creating new dependencies, new colonialism of the kind. Because आपके पास IPR तो है, technology तो आपके पास किसी और के पास है. आपके पास market है बस. You have the market. Okay, the market is there. That's a strong point, but it's limited. So climate change is shaking up the world everywhere. And geopolitics. Then, I think very important issue which we should all get alerted to is the demographic shifts which are undergoing. Which the word is Moti baat ye hai that except for Africa, every part of the world, including India, is going to see a demographic decline. The population is going to go down. For some, it is already there. Japan, Europe, and other places. Some will be struck 20-30 years from now. And in some cases, it will happen 50, 60, 70 years from now. But within the foreseeable future of 50 years, every part of the world, Africa is probably the exception, but they will also probably, it will start happening maybe another 70 years. So if you look at this here, 100 years thing, 100 years is nothing in the nation's. So once demographic decline happens, then the geopolitics will change completely. Today, already, embassies of Korea, of Japan, and many other countries are sending their scouting delegations to villages in Nepal, picking up the people, young students, 12th class pass किया, उनको ले जाते हैं जापान में और कोरिया में और fruit growing में, old age care homes, etc. And they are giving them 1 lakh rupees, 2 lakh rupees. This is now. Just very recently, I came across a news article that the German ambassador here, he was at a valedictory function at some nursing college, where all the nurses who are being trained are going to be taken to Germany. Just a few weeks ago. This is already happening. I know of somebody, a nurse, who is running an academy in Kerala, who is only training counselors for psychiatric patients, and all of them they are training academies. You know, आपको visa दिलाएंगे, आपको करेंगे, and will send you to Europe and Japan. So it is not that we have the IITs graduates alone. Today, nurses are in greater demand perhaps than the IIT graduates. So this is already happening. In the Russia-Ukraine war today, there is massive threat. Somebody says 700,000, somebody says cross million if you take both sides of the same. Country like Russia, with 140 million population, its population is also already going down by about 1 million every year. They don't have people. So they got the North Korean to fight in Kursk, and I believe that our 11,000 came, half of them are already dead. Today, the Russian government, I understand, I think there are laws for it, but somebody in Russia told me, they are paying 600,000 to 700,000, 500 to 700,000 rubles per month to a soldier in this fight in this war. मतलब वो आज रूबल जो है एक रुपए के बराबर है, तो 5 लाख 7 लाख रुपए महीना एक सोल्जर को दे रहे हैं to go and fight. So even if you have everything, how are you going to sustain if you don't have people? So demographic shifts and of course many other. I think this one area this university should talk about study. The other complicating factor is the migration step, which is also linked with demography but also conflicts. Nobody can stop migration. They will come and sit with you. जिसके सिर के ऊपर तलवार पड़ी है, जिसकी रोज वो तो कहीं को भी जाएगा. So we are seeing this happening. Rangers have already come in this way. We are seeing it happening now in people are coming from Myanmar. And we have of course seen the past from people coming from Tibet and Sri Lanka and so many other places. The question is, when will it start happening from Pakistan? What happened? It's one of our big ones. Already last year in the UK, I saw some videos that said कि हम तो इंडिया जा रहे हैं, but big because some problems with electricity, this, that, etc., roads and so on. No, we are not to India. तो गुजरे थे. And I think before yesterday, I saw one statement, was it of Amit Shah or Rajnath Singh, one of our top leaders. He said, "PM को अपने आप ही मिले हुए हैं." So there are these big currents, undercurrents, which will lead to change. A lot of people. And why? Are we not experiencing that? A lot of our people are going. Thousands of students go every. So you have issue of how do we do data, how do we handle the impact of technology, etc. How do we control these technologies, which are really going to be redundant. We might say, they will create many jobs, new jobs. When you create a job for me, at this age, I'm talking of myself. I have a job for you with AI. I cannot handle my own SAP. This is the install, and then it gives me 5 ads that look like the original apps. I don't know what to do. So to learn new skills is not easy. And how do you learn new skills when this education level is so low? Who is going to teach me new skills? So skills have become a very important part of work. Food has become, energy, water. Now these dynamics, these are the complicated factors in the international politics. I think I'm still on page 2, so maybe I should perhaps you let me how many minutes we have. Anyway, let me just. There's so much I want to discuss, but let's now come to more topical, which is I can see smiles already coming. Anticipating what I want to say. The T factor, drop factor. So Trump's rise is equally sound. Trump, of course, will be here for 4 years. So one approach would be that write out this one. Don't be on the wrong side. But don't do the right side also. Because one doesn't know which side he likes more. Today, all the people who are on the right side of the US, they find themselves on the wrong side. So, one thing is, Trump will probably go one way. But after making a lot of changes in the world, some people say my damage. I have some soft corner also. But he's making you ask questions. वो पहले possible नहीं था. He's making you ask, think, what is this new world order, etc. So Trump will go away, but Trumpism will stay. And Trumpism, what is Trumpism? Actually, this is some very deep questions being asked. One big question is about this terrorism. That is the basic question that is asking. All this great system of analysis that is asking a question. Should we go into it? Has it served? And he's asking a very good question, which tallies with what Mr. Modi has said. Why these wars? What is what it up? He is going ahead and says, don't sort of these wars on the basis of norms. Look at what cards you have and then you sort of. And this is anyway what was done after the first World War, after the Second World War. Victors ने बताया information in bombs. You say ki no, he's a killer. He says. Zelensky says that Putin is a killer, and I can't sort of. He goes back on his words. He is the classiest national sovereign. So Trump asks him, but we have the cards. ठीक है आप इधर है आपके पास cards है आपके पास. Without me you have no cards. Give me your minerals, you may have some cards. And now you will see. Ukraine will give you this without security. This is a very good. So this is the second part of it. Trump is asking कि ये norms को छोड़ो, then transaction करो. So you, if and this is what we have been saying, it's all comprehensive national power आपके पास है. If you have comprehensive national power, you have the cards, then you will talk about the norms. So possible Kutumbak is fine, but possible Kutumbak without the power is useless. Because nobody will do this. So it's good to have that moral thing. Moral high ground is very important in business. It's important, but power is equally important. So we are seeing now a new style of difference. That's all. Before you go into serious negotiations, humiliate a person in front of the others. So that he comes down several notches and then you say, how are you? It's a very new style. I was very scared when Mr. Modi went to meet Mr. Trump because he was only fourth. Supposing he had said something. Look at what reaction would have been there. Fortunately, I think Modi ji is a very astute person, politician, etc. The visit came out very well, and we can take pride that we went there, etc. But I have my doubts whether it was really necessary to go. It was really शेर की मार में जाना. अब देखिए पूरा उन्होंने what kind of a resistor he has got. Remember that Panchtantra story? There was this old lawyer. He was sitting in his sofa, and he could not run. Then they said, okay, we'll send one person every day to everything. You do what you want to do. So, सबसे पहले I think Nitina को है. Second was I think Jordan. Who went? And then second was Japan. Third was Jordan. Fourth was Modi ji. Fifth was Starmer and so on. One day, every day, one person is looking and doing deals with him, and this system is continuing. This is a new style of diplomacy. I have not seen this kind of diplomacy in my career. So we have a new world, new leaders, and there. So I think Trumpism is going to stay. So how does the world deal with Trump is going to be very important. And then of course there is going to be a huge impact on the US itself. The US, even when Trump came to power in 70, was a divided state. During the Biden years, it got even more divided. And Trump is saying, no, now if you're divided, now go, let's do something. So US is going to be, now I heard yesterday only some people were telling us A lot of people, rich people, are leaving the US and going east. They can't do it, So they divide the US. So what impact it will have on US policies? And what impact it will have on trust and so many other aspects of US foreign policy, the US itself gets to that. Some of you would have seen his State of the Union address to the Congress. So you had like this, on one side are the Democrats, and one side Republicans are always up and always down to go. Not one person, and one person who tried to do something, he was removed as marshal. Please remove it. That was removed, discipline. And Trump said, look, I am doing so many good things. They should be smiling, but I know they will not smile. I know they will not smile. They have no. So there is and a very polarization in society happens. And you see, let's not forget. Times are different. But the US has gone through a civil war. The 19th century. And it is in some sense an artificial country. By making America first again, etc. There is, what is the US identity? If the US had just do a thought experiment. If the US per capita income were like that of India, $2,500, will there be US? So we are going into a very turbulent time. The US itself will be going, and there is no more backlash. The stock markets have fallen everywhere, and the US with the goddess is not sensitive. It's Lakshmi. The Lakshmi is an hypothetical. Trillions of dollars have been wiped out. $4 trillion I saw something out. In the stock market, this is one of the things. And once the Humpty Dumpty starts breaking, it's back again. For the first time, we are seeing US and Europe seeking a collision course. The US has broken rank with Europe and Russia and Ukraine. Now I'm just listing a few trends. I will not discuss them to be noted. Trump's policies have raised doubts amongst allies and friends about US reliability. Trump has stopped most developmental aid and arms aid, and this is going to have a huge impact on many countries. And Trump has little regard for multilateral institutions, which means he has withdrawn from the WHO and some other places where Paris is collaborating. So, वो वैसे ही ओबा में था, multilateral this UN, ओबा के बाद क्या स्थिति आती है? And of course, today, weaponization of trade, technology, and everything is very much a part of being diplomatic. And we have to now see those who have been watching this for a very long time because of policy, I'm not a student. But the isolationist streak in the US policy is probably coming to the fore. So he is trying to reduce his global commitments. But if you reduce, it's a pendulum. We have seen in the US history of US, who कभी globalist हो जाते हैं, कभी वो in the first, second World War, they entered the First World War, Second World War quite late. So that isolation is very much there. And today they are not able, but if they become isolationist, then what happens to China? Then China becomes number one, but that also is the one. So they will have to take some considerations. But if you break everything very quickly, fast, at breakneck speed, then what tools will you be left with? Today you have a spectrum of recession hanging to the US. Just imagine a US in recession for several years. The entire geopolitics will change. I mean, you will have a global financial crisis then multiplied by 10 times if US goes into deep recession, along with Europe. China of course is linked with them, so there's so many combinations that are possible. I think this is too long, perhaps I will stop here, but let me just come to South Asia. South Asia is also at an inflection point. This is South Asia University, you know it better than I do. And this reconfiguration कहते हैं बात हो गई 144 साल के बाद होता है कि कुछ कॉन्सेंट्रेशन जो हो रही है स्टार्स की वो कुछ इसी तरह की हो रही है. We are at an inflection point, and South Asia obviously will be because we are also linked. So many of one thing is so many of our people are living in these countries. Tens of millions of people, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and so on. So issues like visas, etc. Trump is bringing forward new thinking on how America deals with this. So that's one thing I think is bad. But South Asian nations will have to watch out for the unpredictable. Unfortunately, South Asia is not a cohesive place. In fact, probably South Asia itself, you could ask whether this concept itself didn't exist, say, 78 years ago. It was not that. Because India at that time was not divided. It's only when you divided India and South Asia. We were much, and South Asia has now global footprint. India has a global footprint. And through this, diaspora, etc., every country in some sense has a global footprint. But we don't have that power to really be important. Not that important. India, of course, is one exception in a way. But yet, we are not there. Today, geopolitics, if the top tier is US, Russia, China, and Europe. This is the top tier, that's it. But we can play various roles. We can play a balancer role, we can play a contributor role, because today you have the test. But it is some time before we come to that really at the top level. It is not clear whether Trump will see South Asia through the lens of US-China rivalry or India, of course, we have had Modi's view, which is very good, and fortunately, this is going to be seems to us that there will be a opportunity in US India relations. But speed breakers are ahead. And if we can do a US India bilateral trade deal very quickly, I think that would give a foundation for the next 4 years. US is looking at India as a defense market. Should play our cards well. Basically, India has many levels. Whether it's US, whether it is Europe, whether it's China, whether it's Russia. And that is what we are doing. And then, of course, our own independent groups invest. But I can't be so sure about other solutions. Myanmar is in the same boat. And I think some myopic policies are being part of the West. Too much focus on human rights, democracy, etc. has also created problems in Myanmar. And in the civil war, China is certainly getting. In fact, China's footprint in South Asia has grown so much that it is today a factor, whether you like it or not. US is a factor, whether you like it or not. With Trump stopping all aid, I understand that $500 billion MCC, Millennium, what's it called? Millennium something.
Challenge Corporation.
Challenge
Corporation.
Millennium Challenge Corporation. This is a good step, $500 billion. But they have not suspended it. And I think Nepal has already spent about $190 billion in acquisition of land, etc., to build the power plants and so on. Where will it go? And also, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is just coming out of the crisis. It continues to need the support from IMF, World Bank, and other places. And suddenly, US is now rethinking, and they are the big dollars in these organizations. So Sri Lanka and all the export, the West is today the big export market for all the countries, whether it's RMG exports, our own exports, Nepal, etc. Now with this tariff wars and everything is up in the air. So South Asia should expect some progress. Pakistan, we'll have to see how Pakistan relations evolve. Pakistan has not endured itself well with the US. But the US is also, you never know. You know, the US foreign policy or security policy is not made by one person. At least used to be so. Now, of course, everything is made democracy. But then what Nancy takes on Pakistan or the leader is remains to be seen. Because last time, when he was talking to Imran Khan, he offered mediation on Kashmir. Supposing he does that again. So we don't know. So there's a big. But Pakistan now with what is happening in Pakistan, and we saw yesterday this train hijacking in Pakistan, Afghanistan also. I think it's still early days as to what kind of policies Americans involved with respect to terrorism, radicalism, and so on. But geography will always remain an important thing. Geopolitics means you can never write off either Pakistan or Afghanistan. No country can do it. So, right now, I think he is not yet focused very much on South Asia. But this is Bangladesh. There is some students here from Bangladesh. So, Bangladesh is also going through a very difficult time. And there is right now uncertainty, political uncertainty, elections, etc. being talked about. But certainly, the influence of Jamaat on the interim government, that is something which is very serious. And very regrettably, India-Bangladesh relations are not going very well. We hope that this is temporary. But we need to take a larger view because if radicalism also increases head because of this turbulence, then everyone will be affected. And the US will also have to take a view on Bangladesh because there is some role if the US has played recent. And all these countries have to do this delicate balancing act with China, BRI, etc., and the US. And now we have other issues that talk about it's maritime issues, climate change, and so on. They impact South Asia. I think South Asian countries come together. The habit of talking should and we must come together. And I think BIMSTEC is a good forum to talk about some of this because there are some issues like terrorism, etc. It's very difficult for people to discuss Pakistan. But maybe BIMSTEC could be a way in which some of these countries and some other countries can also. And outreach outside South Asia is also very important. So let me just now conclude with a few thoughts. What should we expect in the future? How will geopolitics evolve? As I said, the new geopolitical environment is shaping. Now, there are no answers to this, and you have only views and opinions on this one. But in this time of great flux and uncertainty and churn that is taking place, let me say that you cannot predict. None of the events that I talked about last 30 years were predicted. And now with the turbulence having increased, so prediction is just not perfect. You can think of a few scenarios and you can hope that these scenarios materialize or don't materialize. But certainly you can work for a better scenario. In other words, the actions that you take today are going to impact the future scenarios. So I put my 2 penny bit behind the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam inclusive scenario. That is what we should work for. It may not happen. It may be utopian thinking, idealistic thinking, but there is no other way. Today, if you talk about these things, many countries who are the recipient of this toxic geopolitics would be very happy to work with you. So, I think that is where, fortunately, in the Indian mindset and generally in the Asian mindset, living together, working together, sharing and caring, the family values, the societal values, these are given primacy. They are there in the back of our mind, whether they are taught in schools or not taught in schools. We recently did one seminar in Thailand. This was called Global Hindu-Buddhist Samvad, where many of the religious masters came together, about 70 people came together. scholars of religion, scholars of politics, economics, etc. Different religions, including Islam, Jain, Christianity, they all came together. And they looked at the world. The two overarching things that we had was conflict avoidance and environmental consciousness. And I think there was complete unanimity. Messages were read from our Prime Minister, from the Prime Minister of Japan, and the high etc. University vice chancellor, directors, so many people came. Everybody felt that this is the time to think of alternative framework, which brings people together. Of course, everybody has their own interest, but in all interests, you have to also look at the large interest. So this is the scenario. What I said so far probably points to a dismal picture, but that is not. That is becoming cynical. You have to be positive about this. After 5,000 साल में बहुत ups and downs. We have been there. We will go through this. But a mindset change, and that is where it should start from here, at university, in the classroom. But all of you become accommodative, tolerant, broad-minded, and visionary. Then I think we would be working for a better scenario, and that's what we hope. Thank you very much.
I would like to propose a vote of thanks as briefly as I can on behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, which is expected to be the think tank of the South Asian University. First and foremost, I would like to thank Dr. Arvind Gupta for absolutely incredibly rich tour de force of geopolitics, the contemporary geopolitics, and its wide-ranging implications. For those of us who have always felt intellectually uncomfortable with the dominant Western geopolitical position, the question has always been from where do we get the alternatives? From where do we get the alternative narratives? I somehow, although the Vivekananda book is seen as a philosophical concept, and I still remember asking this question to Honorable External Minister, and he mentioned how important this concept is as a philosophical concept. I tend to believe that the alternative non-Western or global geopolitical narrative, which questions the narrow-mindedness of these Western narratives, can come from this level. As a student of geopolitics, both one is familiar with classical geopolitics and also more critical geopolitics. And I think that is one of the key takeaways, as far as I'm concerned, from this majestic lecture on geopolitics. He has taken us from the Arctic, warming Arctic change, to other parts of the globe. And he has also reminded us about the superficiality of the, and at the same time, seductiveness of the meta-geographies of international relations. He has reminded us that we are the inhabitants of the Indian subcontinent, and we should also be sensitive to the geopolitics of place names. After all, when Gandhiji asked in the 1930s, what was India, where was India before the British came, he was making an argument that you cannot be post-colonial enough without being pre-colonial. And the pre-colonial richness and heritage that we have enjoyed on the Indian subcontinent, it has to be brought back. We need to return to those human and cultural geographies. We all know that the cartographies, Cold War cartographies, imposed on the Indian subcontinent an identity which, of course, we continue to use that name, that is South Asia. But the boundaries of the Indian subcontinent, cultural, ecological, have always been very expensive and far more porous. So thank you very much, Dr. Arvind Gupta for provoking us to think, and think critically, invite our attention to the fallout of what you have so appropriately called toxic geopolitics. You have reminded us that, of course, the physical geographies cannot change, but the geographs, which is the written geographies, must change. And the time is just right for us to assert our identity as map makers in our own rights rather than passive map takers. This is a work in progress. A lot more needs to be done. And he has also reminded us that we, the people of South Asia, communities of South Asia, which are here in this very precious, unique South Asian space, have a lot of homework to do. And I want to assure you, sir, that at the Institute of South Asian Studies, in all our faculties, we are trying to develop a more global, more inclusive understanding of what international should be in international relations. So there's a lot of journey going on. So thank you very, very much indeed. We are very grateful to Honorable President, as I mentioned earlier. When you have a leader who leads by example and by front, he's the first one to come in the morning. You have to stand in front of him and welcome to see. And he's the last one to go. Always full of ideas, always encouraging us, inspiring us. And he also then, in his very brief, thoughtful remarks, invited our attention to the importance of regional security. And we do have a course here, a lot of students are here on this course. And I want to assure you, sir, that the insights that you will give with us will continue to inspire further discussions in our classrooms and beyond. I simply do not have words to describe how grateful I am to fellow vice presidents, Professor Pankaj Jain, responsible for academic expansion, academic programs. And as you know, we are really moving very, very fast and thoughtfully on that path. New faculty, new programs. Very grateful to Professor Pravan Mukherjee, Vice President, responsible for international cooperation. Our registrar, Dr. Soni, is always there, always supporting, guiding us. My colleagues from the Department of International Relations, our Chairperson, Dr. Vivekananda, Professor Arvind Gupta, team of the legal faculties, other colleagues from other faculties, and wonderful community of students and scholars. Without your participation, without your active participation, we will not be able to go at the space at which we very much want to go forward. I want to acknowledge warmly the presence of Dr. Bhatt with us this morning. We are very grateful you could take out time. And I also want to thank each and every member of the Vivekananda International Foundation delegation who are sitting right here in the first row. Thank you so much for coming, and grateful to Vivekananda International Foundation for entering into and working with us. As Honorable President said, this is not just an MOU on paper, this is an MOU between visions, between two sets of, I would say, forward-looking internals thinking that we are for cooperation, collaboration. And you will see for yourself in the weeks and months to come, this MOU will not only be operationalized, we will have a number of series of lectures, seminars, joint programs working together in this direction. I want to thank IIT department. I want to thank my office staff, Mrs. Choti, everyone who has supported us. I can also see Professor Aggarwal, and he's the Dean of Research and Development, a very distinguished scholar and professor. I can see Professor Senthil sitting here. All my colleagues, I'm very, very grateful to you all. And with these few words, your permission, that you have to bring this session